Hello, and welcome to another episode of Short, Sharp Schlocks, the YouTube show from the makers of Schlock Tactics, which is a bad movie podcast, but here we talk about new movies, whether they be good, bad, or otherwise. My name is Ash, and I'm here once again with you to run down the Schlock Tactics Top 10 Movies of 2020. Yes, we have now finally come to the end of what was a horrific year and a terrifying year and a surreal year for most people, and not a great year to release a movie because most of the cinemas were closed, so some movies were even delayed until next year, but we did still get a bunch of great movies that came out this year, mostly on Netflix or on demand, and ever since everyone was stuck at home, that's all there was to do was watch movies. So I'm going to run down my 10 favourite movies that did come out in 2020. So we're going to kick it right off here at number 10 with a film called Scare Me. Now this is a low budget horror comedy. It's quite improvisational. It's written and directed by Josh Rubin, who also is the main character alongside Aya Cash, and it's really just like I say, it could be a stage play, it could be an improv bit. Just two people that are stuck in a cabin during a storm, and they start telling each other scary stories, and they kind of act them out, very much in the way that Mary Shelley wrote Frankenstein, which I'm sure was the inspiration behind this movie. And it's just real simple, really well acted. Aya Cash in particular is really good. All the stories come with great sound effects and just these subtle little visual effects as well. Like the stories you never go into the story. They're always being told just by one person using their body and using their voice to sort of act it out, but you still really get sucked into them, like I say, based on the performances of the actors and the sound effects and all that sort of stuff. And the pizza delivery guy comes around and he gets involved and starts acting out stories as well. It's a lot of fun. It's a very simple idea, but it's been done really well. So I would really recommend Scare Me if you like your horror, in particularly if you like a horror comedy. In at number 9, that's Tremors Shrieker Island, aka Tremors VII. So if you want my full thoughts on this one, just click right on the YouTube channel here. Should be a related video if you're watching this, I'm sure. You can find out my full thoughts here. But for me, the 7th in this series, and still a lot of fun. Michael Gross back as Burt Gummer in this one, joined by John Heder, Napoleon Dynamite himself, and Jackie Cruz does a really good job as well. It's really just Aliens or slash Predator, slash Jurassic Park. It's not original in the slightest, but it is still a lot of fun, and still the best special effects that this franchise has ever had, which is impressive after 30 years and 7 films. So Tremors Shrieker Island, again, another sort of horror comedy that I would recommend to anyone that likes that sort of thing. In at number 8 is a film that was recommended to me. I think about 3 or 4 people asked me the week this came out, have you seen this? What do you think of this? So it must be my kind of film. That's I'm Thinking of Ending Things, which is a Netflix original, but more importantly, it is from the brilliant mind of Charlie Kaufman. If you don't know that name, you'll know Being John Malkovich, Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, all those sorts of things. So it's very much in that same sort of vein. Stars Jesse Plemons, who seems to pop up in absolutely everything that I watch. So it's really an art house movie for sure. There's I think about a half an hour scene where they're just chatting in a car in a snowstorm. It's that kind of thing. I think particularly of worth a mention here is the performance from Toni Collette and David Thewlis, who play the parents of the lead characters in this one, and they just give a great sort of oddball performance. And there's lots of breaking the fourth wall, lots of kind of things just to mess with you, so you feel like you've seen this scene before, or you feel like this scene is taking place in a slightly different reality, all the kind of things that happen inside Charlie Kaufman's films, inside Charlie Kaufman's head. Adaptation being another example of that kind of fourth wall breaking. So it's that sort of thing. It's a pretty wild ride. It's over 2 hours long, so you have to already like Charlie Kaufman or these types of David Lynch type surrealist art house films to be into this one. But if you do, definitely check it out. It's another great entry in Charlie Kaufman's legendary career. Number 7 is a film that I think flew under a lot of people's radars, or just wasn't given a fair kind of shake, and that's Underwater, which is, as the title suggests, a sci-fi film that is set under the sea. A sort of a deep sea oil rig where people are working. Kristen Stewart is the lead in this one, and again it takes on quite an Aliens type dynamic. You know, she's the strong female protagonist. There's a sort of a disaster on this oil rig, creatures are involved, and there's this sort of stunning third act Lovecraftian twist, which I won't say any more about, but yeah, on the surface of things it seems like a pretty generic kind of action thriller, but I liked it a lot. I like things that are set underwater or in the deep sea. James Cameron's The Abyss obviously will probably be another point of reference for this one. I just think it was really good, claustrophobic, good performance from Kristen Stewart, Vince Cassell as well, and TJ Miller supporting. And there's just some great creature effects, and like I say, the actual creatures themselves are quite unexpected in their Lovecraftian sort of design. And it's just based on the concept that you don't know what's down there, at the bottom of the Mariana Trench. We don't know. There could be all kinds of weird things. So yeah, a very unfairly treated film, underrated film. That's Underwater. In at number 6, another Netflix original. This one is called The Platform. This is a Spanish film. Really a dystopian sci-fi film. Sort of in the vein of 1984 and things like that. It reminds me a lot of Cube as well, a classic kind of dystopian sci-fi horror type film. It's a real kind of simple concept. It's just a sort of vertical prison with many levels, and people just wake up there and they don't know why they're there, or who anyone else is. And in the middle of this kind of column there's this floating platform that comes down, and at the top it's got loads of food on it, and as it comes down everyone gets the sort of time to eat, and it goes down, and obviously by the time it gets to the bottom everything's been eaten and there's nothing for the people below. So it's a not so subtle sort of deconstruction of socialism, and I think a lot of that kind of history in Spain that you can kind of draw from. So yeah, I thought it was really interesting, much like Cube in that sort of sense but with a more political edge, and they have to figure out how they're going to get out of there, and catch that on Netflix right now, The Platform. Number 5, another Netflix original, is called His House. So this one, on the surface, it kind of looks like it's some kind of Jordan Peele kind of a production, an all black cast, and it does have almost a Candyman feel to it. Candyman was a film that didn't come out this year and was meant to, so I feel this sort of takes its place in a weird way. This is a kind of a haunted house film, but with a real hard political edge to it. The protagonists are asylum seekers from Africa who have come to the UK and are put into a horrible kind of council house on an estate, and ended up being sort of haunted by their past and things that manifest themselves in the house, while also sort of showing the horrible experience that asylum seekers do experience. So I think it was a great perspective being told that I don't think certainly don't see a lot of in horror films. Like I say, it's usually Jordan Peele kind of pushing that kind of political message in the American films, but this is a British film showing a kind of a more of a British perspective on race and immigration and that sort of thing, and some of the most unsettling kind of and consistently scary creature effects and ghost effects in this one, and it stars Wunmi Mosaku, who people also might know from the great TV show Lovecraft Country, which was also on this year. So I think she's going to be a big star, and yeah, she's great in this as well. So that's His House. You can watch that right now on Netflix. At number 4, we have a film that I saw very recently, but just sort of barged its way into my top 10 and quite near the top of my top 10, and that's The Lodge. So this is definitely a horror thriller type film. very unsettling, some very disturbing things happening and themes. A pretty typical setup. It's just a dad takes his kids and his fiancée to this lodge in the middle of nowhere in a snowstorm, but then he has to go away for work, so it's just the future evil stepmom and the kids. The future stepmom grew up in a cult and has severe kind of mental health issues as a result, and the kids basically don't like her and they don't want to give her a chance, and it kind of goes from there. Riley Keough is the lead in this one. She's the granddaughter of Elvis. You might know her as that. But she gives a really great performance in this one. The kids are also really good. I mean, it's the brilliance of this film is really, you're never quite sure who you should be rooting for, who is actually the villain in this one. Is it Riley Keough's character, who is this kind of evil stepmom, and maybe she's going to go off the rails because she grew up in a cult and she's going to be mean to the kids, or is it the kids themselves? Are they, and there's a lot of gaslighting going on in this one. They're trying to mess with Riley Keough's character and trying to get her to kind of freak out. So it goes back and forth, and you're never quite sure who's who in terms of the heroes and the villains of the piece, and I think that's quite clever. And like I say, just some really slow burn, psychological, intense kind of horror, and it just kind of blew me away in the way that it all unfolded. So I would really recommend that. That's The Lodge. In at number 3, this is one that came out at the very beginning of the year, and I was actually able to see in the cinema. It seems like a long time ago, and that's Colour Out of Space. So this one is Richard Stanley's triumphant return to filmmaking. You may know him. We actually discussed his work in our H.G. Wells episode. He famously directed, or attempted to direct, The Island of Dr. Moreau, and it all went horribly wrong. Was a once promising director, the early 90s, of sci-fi and horror. This is him returning to directing after 25 years, and it's also based on a H.P. Lovecraft story, and it also stars Nicolas Cage. So this film, I mean, really expectations were super high, but it is every bit as good as you would expect the combination of Richard Stanley, Nicolas Cage and H.P. Lovecraft to be. Just pure insanity. It takes a while to get going, but you do get those Nick Cage freakouts. You do get disgusting, slimy, Lovecraftian effects. You get cosmic horror. That sense of dread coming from the cosmos, and yeah, it's really good fun. A really faithful kind of Lovecraft adaptation, like we haven't had a direct adaptation for quite a few years now, since the heyday of Reanimator and stuff like that, which was never meant to be that serious. This is a bit more serious than that, but apparently they're going to do more adaptations. Richard Stanley, hopefully with Nicolas Cage as well. But yeah, Colour Out of Space was just great fun. Weird as you would expect it to be, with Nicolas Cage being as weird as he can as well, and it just delivers on all fronts. So that's Colour Out of Space. At number 2, probably the only film on this list that I've seen twice. First time in the cinema and second at home, and that's Robert Eggers' The Lighthouse. So you've probably seen images from this film, you've probably seen clips from this film. It made a big impact, a big splash, I think, at the very beginning of this year. Again, January or February here in the UK, I was able to see this in the cinema before the world went to shit, and it's just a two-man show. It could easily be a stage play, like Scare Me that I mentioned before. It's just Robert Pattinson versus Willem Dafoe in a lighthouse. Things go insane. Things also go Lovecraftian. It's been a great year for Lovecraftian kind of either adaptations or themes. Really, very much like a David Lynch film. I know I mentioned David Lynch earlier. I think you're really starting to get entire generations of filmmakers who are trying to make things as weird as David Lynch made, particularly Eraserhead. I would compare The Lighthouse to Eraserhead in its sort of cinematography and its sound design as well. Just things that are meant to make you feel very uncomfortable and freak you out, and are successful in doing so. And the performances are great here. Willem Dafoe particularly, going insane. I think he doesn't have to go very far. He's always poised to uncoil in any film he's in, and it's just a great follow up to The Witch, which is Robert Eggers' debut several years before this film. Yeah, that's The Lighthouse. And just before we get to my number one film of 2020, we're going to give you a quick recap. So from 10 to 2, my favourite films this year were Scare Me, Tremors, Shrieker Island, I'm Thinking of Ending Things, Underwater, The Platform, His House, The Lodge, Colour Out of Space, and The Lighthouse. And we get to my number one, my favourite film of 2020, another film that I was lucky enough to see in the cinema in February here in the UK when it came out, and that is The Invisible Man. As I mentioned a few films ago, H.G. Wells. We've done an episode on H.G. Wells adaptations, one of my favourite writers, War of the Worlds, one of my favourite books. I'm a big fan of H.G. Wells, so I was definitely interested when I heard there was a new adaptation of The Invisible Man coming out. There obviously have been many others, and I was also excited when Lee Whannell was, announced as the writer-director, the guy that's helped to create Saw, and Insidious had a hand in that, so a big horror sort of guy. The weird thing is, it's not at all a faithful adaptation of the novel, but still has ended up being one of the very best films of 2020. So what The Invisible Man 2020 is really all about, it's not at all about the man, although it does have an invisible man in it. It all centres around Elizabeth Moss's fantastic performance as the protagonist in this one, and it's all about abusive relationships, gaslighting, again, we mentioned that earlier, Me Too, that sort of movement as well. It's all about the role of women in relationships and how men are in that privileged position to take these liberties that they do. So the Invisible Man in this one, you actually hardly see him at all. He's hardly in it, but that's what makes it great. Like there are scenes where she's alone and she looks into the corner of the room, panicked, and then looks back again, and you never know if the Invisible Man was there or not, which obviously is the position that she's in as well. So Elizabeth Moss has really carved out this niche for herself in this kind of feminist TV shows and films. Obviously made her name with The Handmaid's Tale in a very similar role, and she's really great at playing the kind of abused, psychologically damaged character, and that's what she does fantastically in this. And just 2 hours long, the film, and I never stopped being impressed. I never stopped being kind of amazed when a new sort of twist would unfurl, and it's just a fantastic way of taking a really old source material that's been adapted a ton of times before and putting a really modern twist. And it has so much important things, I think, to say, this film, about gaslighting and psychological abuse, and lots of things that are really important to be everyone to be talking about. And even more impressive that it was written by a man as well, Lee Whannell. So that's my number one film of 2020, The Invisible Man. Go check it out. I'm sure it's on DVD and Blu-ray and everywhere now. So I think that's the absolute best film this year. So what did you think were the best films of 2020? Let me know in the comments below. What have I missed out that I maybe should have seen? I mean, there are still quite a few films that I've yet to get round to, but I thought it was time to put down my 10 favourite as it stands now. I'm sure I'll catch up on a lot more next year that I missed, but let me know in the comments below. What do you think I should watch that's maybe similar to the films on this list? Do you disagree with any films that I've put quite high up that you thought weren't that great? Let me know in the comments below. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. You'll be notified whenever one of these videos goes out. Obviously check out the podcast, and go ahead and follow us on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter at Schlock Tactics, where you can get in touch with us at any time and let us know what you think about what we're doing and what you'd maybe like us to review or talk about as well. But that has been another episode of Short Sharp Schlocks, the 10 best movies of 2020, and I'll catch you on the next show. Bye.